This is a skill analysis over a lacrosse overhand shot, oftentimes called a power shot. What is lacrosse? Lacrosse is a field sport, much like soccer and hockey and field hockey, that is played with a stick called a crosse and a hard rubber ball. 11 fielders and 1 goalie are on the field at all times for each team during the regulation playing time. There are many components and phases to the power shot, including the approach, crankback, stick acceleration, stick deceleration, follow-through, and recovery. The body reference points. For a right-handed player, the top arm is the right arm, the bottom arm is the left arm, the lead leg is the left leg, the drive leg is the right leg. This would be the same as for a left-handed person, just completely the opposite. Phases of the throw. The approach phase, crankback phase, stick acceleration, stick deceleration, follow through, and recovery. So the approach phase, the player uses this time to get his or her footing ready and increases the velocity before the throw. The approach can be achieved by a series of steps preparing the player's body for shooting. These steps can be a crow hop, forward or backward steps, or crossover steps. This ends when the drive foot makes contact with the ground. The crankback phase is also known as the wind-up phase or cocking phase. In the lower extremities, the drive step occurs, which is from when the drive leg touches the ground to after the lunge when the lead leg makes contact with the ground. At the same time, the upper extremities cock back in a way that both the top and the bottom elbow are completely flexed. The stick acceleration phase. This phase starts from the time the top of the bottom arm begins to extend out of the flex position, and then this phase ends when the ball is released. Power comes from the arms, legs, shoulders, back, and the core. The player should be able to hear a swooshing noise of the stick cutting through the wind. The stick deceleration and follow-through phase. These two phases kind of go hand in hand. The stick deceleration begins when the ball leaves the stick and ends when the top arm is fully extending across the body. The follow-through ends when the trunk is fully rotated as to almost be facing the opposite direction from when starting the crankback phase. The recovery phase. This phase serves as a time for the player to get back into the ready position to continue playing. The whole body will unwind, and the player should regain their footing to be able to run, catch a rebound, or block the goalie's throw. Musculature and joints used during the overhand throw. The movement definitions. Concentrically means the muscle is shortening while it is under tension. Eccentrically means the muscle lengthens while it's under tension. And isometrically means that there's a steady contraction. The muscle and the joint do not move while it's being flexed. The hand and the wrist. Isometric contraction while holding the lacrosse stick. The muscles used are the flexor carpi radialis, flexor carpi ulnaris, palmaris longus, flexor digitorum profundus, flexor digitorum superficialis, and the flexor pollicis longus. The radiohumeral, glenohumeral, and the shoulder girdle. The radiohumeral joint is flexed, and it uses the biceps brachii, brachialis, brachioradialis. The glenohumeral joint, when it's flexed, is using the pectoralis major, anterior deltoid, coracoid and the biceps brachii. The shoulder girdle will be elevated and rotated upwardly, and it uses the trapezius, levator scapulae, and the serratus anterior. During the crankback phase, the radiohumeral joint, glenohumeral joint, and the shoulder girdle will concentrically contract until reaching full flexion. The radiohumeral joint, when it is extended, uses the triceps brachii and the anconeus. The glenohumeral joint, when it is extended, uses the latissimus dorsi, teres major, posterior deltoid, pectoralis major. And when the shoulder girdle is depressed and downwardly rotated, it uses the rhomboids, the levator scapulae, and the pectoralis minor. During the stick acceleration and deceleration phase, the radiohumeral joint and glenohumeral joint and shoulder girdle are concentrically extending. The talocrural, the patellofemoral, and the acetabellofemoral joints. The talocrural joint, when it is plantar flexed, is using the gastrocnemius, flexor digitorum longus, flexor hallucis longus, peroneus brevis, plantaris, soleus, and tibialis posterior. The patellofemoral joint, when it is flexed, is using the sartorius, biceps femoris, semitendinosus, the semimembranosus, gracilis, popliteus, and the gastrocnemius. The acetabellofemoral joint, when it is flexed, is using the iliopsoas, the pectineus, rectus femoris, sartorius, gluteus minimus, tensor fasciae latae. During all phases of the throw, the leg muscles are firing concentrically to add force and then eccentrically to remain balanced in a standing position. The talocrural, patellofemoral, and acetabellofemoral continued. The talocrural joint, when it is plantar flexed, is the same as the last slide, is the gastrocnemius, flexor digitorum longus, flexor hallucis longus, peroneus brevis, and the plantaris, soleus, and tibialis posterior. The patellofemoral joint, when it is extended, is the rectus femoris, vastus intermedius, vastus lateralis, and the vastus medialis. The acetabellofemoral joint, when it is extended, uses the adductor magnus, semitendinosus, semimembranosus, biceps femoris, and gluteus maximus. The back and core muscles also play a huge role in the overhand shot, as they not only add power to the shot, but they provide support for the trunk to remain upright. The muscles used are the trapezius, rhomboids, internal-external obliques, rectus and transverse abdominis, erector spinae, and the longissimus thoracis. The musculature prone to injury. Injuries during an overhand throw are not common but are possible. These can include chronic and acute injuries. Sprains, strains, and tears to the muscles, ligaments, and tendons. Most commonly, they're in the leg and the patellofemoral joint. These ligaments would be the ACL, PCL, MCL, and LCL. When the foot is planted in the ground but the body keeps moving, causes tension and twisting of the structures in the knees. This is an acute injury. Rotator cuff injuries are also seen. This is an injury caused by repetitive overhand motions, which is seen in the upper arm during the shot. The muscles are the supraspinatus muscle and the tendon, the infraspinatus, the teres minor, and the subscapularis muscle and the tendon. This is a chronic injury and occurs over repetitive throws. Key aspects of the shot: strong foundational stance and a powerful throw. A strong stance and foundation of the throw. A good shot needs a strong foundation to push off from. Many new and young players have a weak stance and cannot get enough power through their legs. As a way to test the strength of a stance, the coach may have the player stand stationary with the lead leg and drive leg both on the ground. The coach then will push the player. If the player falls, their stance is too weak. If the player stays upright, then their stance is likely strong enough. Hearing the cross break the wind. A good way to judge if the player's throw is strong enough is to listen for the swooshing noise made by the stick cutting through the wind. Coaches may have a player continue to throw a power shot over and over in practice until the swooshing sound is heard. Performance issues. Some issues are shooting side-armed and showing the ball before shooting. Throwing it sidearm. Many young and new players will attempt to throw the power shot with a sidearm. A sidearm shot is caused when the player tucks their top arm and elbow into their side, preventing full range of motion and lack of power. This causes the player to hold onto the ball longer, making it more difficult for a right-handed player to shoot to the right side of the goal and for the left-handed player to shoot to the left side of the goal. Another common performance issue is showing the ball before the throw. A goalie watches the ball before the player takes a shot to judge where it's going. A good shooter will hold a stick with the ball at an angle that's behind their head, where the goalie cannot see the ball. This causes the goalie to not be able to predict where the ball is coming from as quickly. A new and young player will sometimes hold the stick in sight of the goalie, making it easier for them to judge the path of the ball. To summarize everything, the approach, the crank back, the stick acceleration, stick deceleration, the follow through, and the recovery are all phases of the lacrosse overhand throw. Shooting a lacrosse shot is a full body activity and takes numerous muscles, articulations, and other musculoskeletal structures throughout the body to perform a shot successfully. Good coaching can implement drills to master many skills that are key aspects in the overhand shot. This can ultimately prevent some injuries, while other injuries are inevitable. Thank you for listening to my presentation.